Building wealth to secure your future, protect your family, and support your values is a lifelong journey. All of us want to ensure the people, communities, and causes that we care about are taken care of both now and in the future. Ongoing changes in the global economy, healthcare, and the environment mean planning for the future is far more complicated than it's ever been before.
A generation ago, we would have never envisioned how things like climate change, housing prices, or longer life expectancies would impact our daily lives. All of these factors influence how we think about building, using, or passing on our wealth.
For most of our clients, their objectives haven't changed. Many want to help their kids purchase their first home, for example. But at the same time, they also want to protect their family's wealth just in case their child's relationship ends.
Or they may want to pass on a vacation property or keep a family business in the family, all while ensuring they're properly funding any potential tax liability for the estate.
When it comes to wealth transfer, there's a lot to think about and a lot to talk about because it's about the bigger picture. It's not just about the numbers. It's about your family values, relationships, and the kind of legacy that you want to leave.
The earlier you start to plan for the transfer of your wealth, the earlier we can incorporate your succession goals into your financial plan. At IG, that plan is created by your personal advisor, along with our team of tax and estate experts. Through our holistic, multi-generational service approach, the same people you're planning for can also benefit from our advice.
Every good plan begins with a conversation, and having that initial conversation with an experienced and trusted advisor can help you balance the emotions of these important decisions while providing peace of mind and clarity about your future.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to have a discussion around a key topic that has recently come to our practice, Weary and Associates Private Wealth Management, and where clients are looking for guidance and advice on, and that is the transition of family wealth. A couple of housekeeping items first. If you have any technical issues, please click on the chat button at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions you'd like to ask to Barb and myself directly, please click on the Q&A button. When thinking about this topic, this quote really resonated with me. Families are like branches on a tree. We all grow in different directions, yet our roots remain as one. Family members may move to different parts of the country, may add family members through marriage to, and birth. We all have different experiences, personalities, but when we look at financial planning for the family, we view it as one unit. We want to make sure that we have success for our future generations, but also they're rooted and grounded today. Speaking about families, we want to tell you a little bit more about our family at Weary and Associates Private Wealth Management. Barb and I are going to be doing today's webinar, but Allison and Austin are really integral pieces to our team as well. We look at financial planning in a holistic view, all areas of your financial life. Estate planning is just one of those areas. In today's discussion, we're talking about 3 pillars, but these pillars are not necessarily linear. You may be somewhere amongst the spectrum when transitioning your family's wealth. First is consider, what type of transition do you want to occur? What type of goal do you want to succeed with that? How is that going to happen? When and to who? Communicate that, hopefully first with a financial advisor or an expert, and then so that way they can set it up in your plan, make sure it works well today and also into the future. And then it might go back to communicate, communicate with your loved ones on who you want to give the money to, and then consider all the options. What is the best way to structure that? When we think about transitioning of family wealth, we've seen in the GTA a large boom in the housing market. A lot of houses now and the starter homes are over $1 million. And I'm proud to be on this webinar with Barbara Weary, a certified financial planner, principal at Weary and Associates. And with her 16 years of experience, Barb, I'm just wondering, we've had a lot of clients recently talk to us about helping out their kids with a down payment and a gift. What are sort of your perspectives on that? and just some introductory thoughts on it.
Well, thank you, Warren. I'm glad to join you today in this webinar, talking about legacy, family values, and what we are trying to accomplish as families, and what we want to pass on as planners, how we want to make sure that we help our clients through that. All this is really near and dear to my heart. So thank you all for everybody who has joined us tonight for this session. Again, please, if you have any questions, we invite you to type into the Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. And if you're having any technical issues, or you want to chat with the group, please use the chat function for that as well. So when we think of this whole wanting to pass along family wealth, wow, this is like, we're only going to get to the tip of the iceberg tonight because there's so much in this. But one of the things that there are a few things that I like to remind clients of, or talk to clients about so that they think, take the time to think about it, is generally we spend a lifetime building our wealth. Doesn't it sort of deserve some time and thought into how we're going to transition it? So there are lots of things that we come across. Warren, you and I in the last while, certainly in the last year or so, I had many conversations with our clients about wanting to do some gifting while they're living. We also talk about all other areas of financial planning and estate planning and transitioning. We want to make sure that we help our clients have those conversations with each other, maybe between a couple, and talk about what they want to have happen. Next level communication might be with their children. Maybe it's with their parents. Of any of you in the group, talk to your parents about what their estate plan is. It's talking and communicating, and then figuring out ways that we can structure it to ensure that what you want to have happen is actually what's going to happen in the most tax efficient way.
Yeah, I think communication and honesty. I mean, for the kids' side too, you want them to know where they stand. What is their responsibility if they receive a gift? Do they feel, do they feel like they deserve it? Maybe not deserve it, but how do they feel? Do they still see themselves as successful, even though they needed a gift to get, an entrance into the housing market? And these are some questions that maybe are overlooked, and just being honest and open and having the conversation, while it may be difficult, needs to happen. And one way that we can help out in that is being a quarterback, continuing the conversation, making sure that it's not emotional, because both money and family dynamics, and then throwing a little bit of estate and death, gets very emotional at times. So
yeah, who wants to talk about death and taxes, eh?
Yeah.
I mean, woohoo. No, they are difficult conversations that often we find, because we're not members of the family, where we can look at it from the perspective of just, I guess, the clearest way, and make sure that our clients are thinking through. I mean, some of the things like the gifting to your children, can you, if you want to do that, I think that's fantastic and very generous of parents who want to help their kids, let's say, buy a house. But ultimately, can you also afford to do that? So, and how many kids do you have? And, can you afford to do it to all of those kids? What's the tax liability in your estate? Are you in a part of a blended family? Maybe your family isn't a traditional family. Maybe your family is charitable causes that are really close to your heart. Maybe it's friends, maybe it's nieces and nephews. And so starting that conversation and figuring out the best way to plan around that is, I think, really important, and actually incredibly, like you said, Warren, I think very empowering to everybody, empowering to all the generations that are part of the discussion.
So if we think about a house purchase, because in the GTA, this is a, we've heard a lot of these conversations within the past year, and specifically regarding a gift. What are some of your thoughts on the gifting for a down payment on a first purchase of a home?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's important to remember a gift is a gift. It's a gift. There's no control. There's no take backs. There's no, it's a gift. So I think it's important to understand that. Another thing that I would always say is, again, if you have multiple children, can you afford? And then how do you make it equal? Like, how do you make sure that it's fair? So if you want to gift one child something at this point, can you then gift another child? Like in my case, I've got 4 kids. I've got 4 kids with a big age gap. So if I gift to my 25-year-old now some more money towards a down payment, how to make sure that that is perceived as equal and fair by the time my 10-year-old reaches house purchase time. So there's lots of different things to consider around that. A big one is also around family law. It's kind of, I don't know if I could say it's a bit ironic that people spend so much time often on the will side of things and what's going to happen after they're gone, and thinking through family law, taxes, protecting in case, their child's marriage breaks down, or a child predeceases them, and they think this thing through, and the lawyers go through all the if, ands, and all of that stuff with them. But then it's almost like a knee-jerk emotional reaction when it comes to gifting for a down payment. So if you have the discussion early on, then one of the things that we look at is, can it be a loan? Does it have to be a gift? If it's a gift, could that be divided? Is this a new relationship that your child is in? And what if that relationship breaks down a few years down the line or a few months down the line? Are you prepared for this gift that you intend to go to your child now could be divisible with their future ex-partner? Now, you're in our practice, Warren, you do a lot on the mortgage side with our clients. What are some of your comments around the gifting and loaning, et cetera?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation on gifting versus loaning and how the mortgage provider views it. So if it's a loan, you can't loan the entire value of the house. So if it's $1 million house, you can't have $800,000 mortgage and a $200,000 loan from mom and dad. Like the bank won't allow that. So they'll come to you and say, is the $200,000 down payment a gift? It needs to be a gift. And they'll go to the child and ask them to prove and have some documentation that it's a gift. And they'll go to the parents and they'll say, this is a gift as well. And the parents assume it as a gift. Now, you can't have it as a gift first, and then the marriage breaks down or something happens, there's problems in the housing, and now you backtrack and say, as a parent, no, it's a loan. I want to protect my asset. You can't, unfortunately, you can't do that. So,
right.
Making it obvious from the beginning that it's a gift, there'll be documentation around that. And if you're going to make it a loan, you got to make sure you have all the characteristics of a traditional loan: interest payments, collateral, insurance against the property. And
sounds complicated.
Yeah, it is. And if you're doing the interest payments, make sure that they're actual payments, because if no payments are occurring, then the government and CRA might view it as a sham loan and not really respect it and come back to you and say, this never actually happened. It was more of a gift. So it is complicated. And that's where, as you mentioned, getting experts involved early, having the conversations early from both sides, the kids and the parents. So that way they know what their responsibility is on the loan side and what the parents' responsibility is as well. And having that process early, because we know houses are emotional. You walk into a house, you're blown away. It's got a great yard. You love the kitchen, and you buy the home right away. And then it closes in 30 or 60 days. And that's not enough time to have the conversation, go through all the legal work, have the tax accountants look at the gift versus the loan and make sure everything is good. So it's a complicated situation, and make sure that you plan far out, into the future on it.
I can think of two sort of very sort of different scenarios that we ran into recently with client families. In one family, the parents of our clients, we don't know the parents, so we weren't involved in any sort of planning. And the parents decided to gift one of two kids, so our client's older sister, a significant amount towards her and her partner buying a house. And then he said, or the parent said to the other daughter, our client, well, I'm going to give you the same amount. But the problem was there wasn't a structure around how he was actually going to be able to do that in a tax efficient way. And so what ended up happening is it couldn't be equal. And it couldn't be equal in the same length of time because dad wasn't able to actually pull that off. His heart was in the right place. What he wanted to do was to be equal. But because there wasn't the tax planning and stuff that went on initially, it didn't work out with what his intention was. And then I can think of another scenario where the clients did involve us in the process and we talked through what they were trying to accomplish, talked through the numbers, looked at the plan, made sure they could afford it, talked about what their wishes were, and then we're able to help them structure it in a way that did what they wanted to do, empowered their children, was equal to their children, and then also had some safeguards in there as far as the whole potential, marriage breakdown stuff as far as protecting it. So not everything is going to be easy, and we can't always tie it up with a little bow, but it is something that if you put in the time initially and the planning initially, I can pretty much guarantee you're going to end up with a better outcome than if you don't, right?
Yeah, and on that, having multiple kids makes it a little bit more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
They have different dynamics, different out views, and different ages too.
Mm.
So like your family, difference between 25 and 10 is a lot. And so thinking about all those aspects and then thinking about your own will and your estate down the road, there's often in wills, there's a throwaway line saying that all loans are forgiven. Well, that might not be at the case, right? If you have a younger child that hasn't, planned out their gift yet and haven't, fully functioned it, do you really want to forgive the loan of the older child that has used the money for a house? That might be going against what you want, right?
Yeah, it's done that unequal thing, which was never your intention,
Mm-hmm.
right?
So moving from one household asset to another, often we get questions about family cottages, vacation properties. What are some of your thoughts on that and transitioning those assets between generations?
Wow, another like super hot, topic, as they say, that people approach us about a lot. Think about the cottage, and it can be very similar to family business. Just a family business, it's almost like it's a whole topic all unto itself. So we're going to kind of put that on the side for tonight's discussion. But the cottage, there's so much emotion that's generally, in that building, because might have been in the family for decades, could be in a couple of generations, and the parents have this thought, this idealistic thought, perhaps, that the kids will have this beautiful space where everybody will get along and they'll have their own, their families up, and it'll be, fantastic for generations to come. Doesn't often actually work out that way in our experience. There are a few different things to consider. Do the kids actually want the cottage? Again, communication, asking questions. They want the cottage. Can they afford it? Okay. There's ongoing maintenance. Will they agree? Are they at equal levels to be able to do it? Will they agree on what is needed in order to maintain the cottage? Will they agree on who gets to use the cottage when? Will they agree if they need to rent it out to help cover some of the costs on when it gets rented out? Or what about COVID? I mean, COVID took some of these multi-family cottages and suddenly said, for safety's sake, you can't all be here at once. So can you now agree as to who's going to come and go? What if one child lives here, one child lives in Montreal, and the other child lives, somewhere in the States, and the child in the States never uses it, but still gets the bill? Like there's a lot of, I think that is such a hot, again, communication thing. Talk, what do people want? What are their intentions? And then what is truly realistic? The other big part around cottages is tax. We mentioned before, death and taxes, fun topics, but tax is a big issue. There are a lot of families that have cottages that have appreciated in value significantly. Unfortunately, most of those cottages are not going to be able to be the principal exemption. In other words, all of that growth is going to be taxable at some point. And it's generally, that's taxable at that time of going down a generation. Okay, so now not only do you have the maintenance and the dynamics, will everybody get along? Will they be able to afford it? Can they afford the tax bill? Right? Now there's some, again, planning, there's communication, there's planning, there's intention, there's figuring out, there's some tools we can use. Maybe the conversation with the 3 kids is one kid said, yeah, I really, really want the cottage. And the other 2 rather have the money, no offense, mom and dad, love the cottage, great, memories, but our family is going in a different direction, or we want, to do something different. We want to keep the cottage. And the child who wants the cottage, we need to look at it from an estate level on an after-tax basis. Okay, because we need to realize, in order to keep that $600,000 cottage, let's say, maybe we also need to come up with $100,000 to pay the taxes on it, or $200,000 or so to pay the taxes on it. So maybe that child who wants the cottage, maybe they buy some insurance that would pay out when that tax bill was owed, so the insurance can pay the taxes and they can keep the cottage. It's not always that mom and dad need to do all of the planning. They need to have the conversation, but maybe it's the child now who gets involved in the planning and how to actually mitigate that tax bill, with small dollars now to grow to be enough that they can keep this prized cottage. But things change too, and that's another big thing about this. All of this topic is life changes. So what somebody might want now could be different in the future.
And I think the tax aspect is overlooked, as you mentioned. A portion of that too is if it's a $600,000 cottage and you want to be fair and equal to your other kids, you have to have after-tax dollars for the other kids if you want to be equal and fair in everyone's minds. So I think that's a portion that's overlooked. Hey, I have $2 million, but actually after tax, it's not the same. And if you have 3 kids, can you actually split it out 3 ways where one gets the cottage, the family cottage, and the other 2 get after tax dollars? That makes it fair and equal. So it is complex. It's not cookie cutter. And as you mentioned, conversations need to be had throughout, early on, throughout the discussion, and then later on in making sure it's implemented correctly and followed through on.
Oh, you know what? I'm so glad you brought that up, Warren, because how many times have we seen good intentions not in fact get carried through because the document never got signed? Mm-hmm. And we've even had conversations with our the niece of a client or the daughter of a client about, but mom said, but dad said, but auntie said, but actually auntie intended to, but auntie never actually put it in writing to make it happen. And talk about a whole can of worms. I mean, we're having another seminar next week where we're going to get into, diving into more of that estate part and that estate piece. And we're going to talk more about wills, powers of attorney, and some of the documentation and more around taxation and things like that. But there's the intention, and then there's to make sure that you actually follow through on that intention and then update it as necessary. I mean, one of the things that comes up here is blended families. I'm from a blended family. I have a blended, or I'm not from a blended family. I'm from a nuclear family, but I have a blended family. So, also when it comes to transitioning wealth, we also need to consider some of those other, nuances about our family tree, and to make sure that we're looking at things in a way again, my wishes would be followed through and maybe updated. I mean, I've updated my will in the last 10 years because what my intentions were 10 years ago as a newer blended family versus 10 years later as an established blended family, my wishes have changed. So my will, my estate plan needs to change as well.
Sure, and signing the will. It's one thing to get the will done, but you got to sign it. You've done all the hard work. Just sign the will.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and you bring up a good point. So for non-traditional families, are there any other avenues or areas that you can transition your wealth to, maybe a charity, that aren't often thought of?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I am a charitable person, and I like the idea of giving back. So part of my estate plan is that there is a charitable component to it. And what's important to know, if it is important to you that you want to do some charity, then please make sure it's part of your plan. Because there's ways that you can do it really, really well. And there's ways that you can miss out a little. Okay. And then an example of that is there's something you can do where you can donate securities. That could be mutual funds, that can be pooled investments. Just donate investments that have grown directly to a charity, get the tax receipt for the full donation without the tax bill for the growth of the investment. So if it's done right and it's structured well, that's one strategy. Another strategy that we've done is we started a family foundation using the IG charitable foundation structure. So we didn't have to go out and spend a lot of money to start a foundation at all. All we had to do was open up an account. But this is now a foundation that for me and my family will provide some legacy as far as that charitable stuff that is important part of the roots in our culture, in our family. It can continue. It can be something that is ongoing long after we're gone, and our kids can continue to be involved in it without putting a whole lot of money into it. So I'm doing some tax planning and also some, planning around our values. So there's lots of different things that you can do. You just need to, open the conversation to find out what the opportunities are out there.
So I hope, Barb, you don't mind if I can shift the conversation a little bit. So, sometimes grandparents don't necessarily like their kids, but they love their grandkids. So when grandparents want to gift to the grandkids, there are some tricky situations, but there's some creative ideas that can be brought up as well.
For sure.
Specifically talking about gifting and transitioning wealth to minor kids. Where do you sort of stand on that?
Well, any of you in the audience who have had a conversation with me about this know how passionate about I am, that please don't put minors as direct beneficiaries on anything. So, and I also joke around the fact that you only like your grandkids that much more because they haven't been teenagers for you yet, or you're not living under the same roof,
That's definitely it. Yeah.
Yeah. But there are situations for sure that we might want to skip a generation, or we feel that our children have enough, and therefore we want to help out our kids by maybe helping out their kids. Like there's all kinds of different reasons why we might want to give to our grandchildren as opposed to our children. So it's, all joking aside, it's not necessarily we don't like our kids, but there might be some things that we have in our head around it. So we often will have the conversation with our clients around just making sure that we understand what is their driving force on that. Because is it that they think if they give it to the grandkids, then the grandkids will be able to use it to say, go to Disney World? Is it for their post-secondary education? Or is it to buy a future house? Like, well, what's the intention? And so once you understand, what the intention is, then we can start talking about ways to structure it. What terrifies me about leaving a minor as a beneficiary, a few things. One, the reality is, unless there's a trust that's created with that, it's messy. It is messy. It is difficult. It is so much paperwork. It's time and the whole bit for very little benefit. And then on their 18th birthday, this is the most terrifying part for me, on their 18th birthday. Here you go, no strings attached, right? If that's $2,000, maybe that's not a big deal. If it's $100,000, I don't know an 18-year-old on their 18th birthday that should be getting a check for $100,000, no strings attached, right?
I agree.
So that's where I get worried, is your intention is that you want to do something nice for your grandchildren, but if it's truly so they can go to Disney World, give the money to your kids, let your kids take them to Disney World. If it's that maybe it's for education, well, maybe you want to look at an education, savings plan for them. If it's that you want to have money there for them once they become adults, not really to live off of, because maybe the parents are well off, your kids, the parents are well off. It's more about leaving for the grandkids, then making sure that that's structured properly so that they don't get too much too soon. And that, your intentions, your well intent, what you want, your values, your family values will be able to continue.
I think we've noticed that throughout all of these areas, communication is key. Having an open conversation from the kid's side, making sure that you feel that you're not, that you are not being put down by receiving the gift. You're still empowered. You're still growing. You're still able to be yourself. You're not obliged to your parents. So I think that's a big side on the on the kids and what they go through. As being a parent, what sort of ways do you want to communicate, have this open conversation do you see?
As a parent, I can tell you it is hard. It is hard to start thinking about this and thinking about, what do we want to do? And my first conversation is with my husband about, what are our values? Are we on the same page? What can we afford? Does it make sense? Can we be equal? Will the perception be that it's equal? For sure. But I also really loved your point about, I feel like part of the reason that I did build my own wealth and built my business in the whole bit is because I put in the energy to do that. And I'm very proud of it. I want the same thing for my kids. I want them to be proud. I remember buying my first house. And I remember being so proud. Now, mind you, the numbers were significantly smaller back then, right? But being really, really proud of the fact that I saved up towards a down payment. Proud of the fact that, I could get that mortgage. And, so I think your point, Warren, is very valid. There's that old saying about let's teach them to fish, right? Rather than just give them the fish. I apologize if you can hear my dogs barking in the background. There you go, working from home. But family dynamics, maybe I'll leave it all to the dogs. We'll see. Get a muzzle or something for the little one so she's quiet. But I want to also make sure that my family, the next generation and the generation after that, also have that same pride in what they're doing and the same drive. Because if you're driven and you're in, doing something that you love, then you're going to have that passion. You're going to want to go to work every day. If you feel that everything's handed to you, maybe that takes some of that away, right? So I think that's some of that emotional, that human aspect of the planning that is important too.
Yeah, and maintain that value of the dollar for the child as well. Me being a little bit younger and closer to child, I understand making sure that I still feel successful when I achieve something, buying a home or making a big purchase, you should feel proud of yourself. You should feel that sense of pride. And so still having that it's a tough dynamic, and being honest, I think on both sides and open is able to, make sure that everyone is okay with it, make sure that nothing is hidden, and having, as you said early on, a third party be part of that conversation, help steer the conversation away from getting too emotional, adds a lot of value. And making sure there's a reasoning voice through the whole thing.
And having been part of a number of family meetings over the years, I'm not emotionally involved in it. And so it does I think it makes it much easier for me to provide some perspective. And as the professional, it does help, whether that's the lawyer, the accountant, somebody like us, as a certified financial planning team, to be part of that discussion does help. I'm kind of curious. I don't know if people in the audience are willing to throw into the chat, but how many of you have talked to your parents? Like, do you know what their plan is? Have you talked to your kids? Do they know? I think it's a different, like, some families do it, and that's amazing. We find more often than not, most of us need a nudge to understand what the importance of doing it. And part of what we want to do tonight is, for those of you who are thinking, maybe we want to do something, but it takes time. And that's the other part. You got to pay money to get a will. I mean, so you're talking about death, taxes, and you got to pay for it. I mean, who wants to do that? Right? But it's such an important document to put together. Or if you're gifting, if you're loaning to your kids towards a house, getting some of the legal stuff in place to help protect them in the event that a relationship breaks down, or there are all kinds of things. It takes a little bit of time, energy, and does take a little bit of money. But what you can be protecting is a lot more than that. And it's not just about the money. It's about everybody being on the same page going into something, understanding.
And planning for both sides, right? So how does your financial picture look today? How does it look with this transition? How will it look in the future? And for the child, how does their picture look now? How will it look with this transition? And so that way they can plan for it as well. We've had conversations with clients when they didn't expect it to happen. It's a great surprise to have, but they would have made a couple of decisions previously in their past and within the past recent time about where they were going to take money from to buy something or allocate towards. So, communication is important. Planning is important as well on both sides. And, when we think about financial planning, we often think of it as a circle. And, cash flow management is one, preparing for the unexpected, insurance planning is another. But two important segments of that circle are planning for major expenditures, if that's a gift, or transitioning money while you're living, and sharing your wealth. And we can't complete that circle, that full financial circle, without every aspect being examined, looked at, talked about, considered, and fully flushed out. Mm-hmm. And so really looking at all of those 6 pillars, and those two specifically, is important.
I can think of a few client conversations we've had recently, and one was they were holding on to a property that had been in the family for a long time because they really thought that that's what their kids wanted. And then when we opened this discussion, got the kids involved, turns out the kids didn't want to keep it. It wasn't practical for their lives. That took this massive weight off of the parents' shoulders. So they're like, now we don't have to maintain this, and we can now move on. We can sell it. We can, do something different rather than being tied to something that they felt that they were holding on to without knowing that, in fact, that's not what the kids wanted. And it works both ways, right? So we've certainly seen kids who've been, saying, mom, dad, give me money, and we've seen situations that have been really uncomfortable because the child has asked the parent to do something that wasn't in the parent's financial best interests. So if we can get involved and help the parents know if it's in their best interest, or even be part of that discussion and help them, that intermediary, if you want to call it, mm-hmm. to the child to say, honestly, mom can't, or, mom and dad, it's not in their best interest to do this. Let's work with you to figure out if there's another way that we can help you reach your goals.
Yeah, because we can be, creative, come up with different ideas that aren't just strictly a transfer of money. As you mentioned, insurance can be used very well in these transfers of assets to a great benefit for everyone involved.
You're saying the evil word insurance. Probably half of our audience is going, "Oh my God, don't say that word." But insurance is a way to take something taxable and make it non-taxable. It can be used as a type of investment, and the reason we talk about it in this wealth transition is because it's one of the only things that can go down a generation without tax. So it's something you can build and still can go down a generation without tax. You can even go down a couple of generations. So I just want to say that in case, some of you are closing your ears going, oh my God, I hate insurance. Please don't say insurance. Is it, within the context of estate planning can actually be, believe it or not, a really good tool.
And I hope everyone on the webinar that's listening understands that these are complicated issues, and you don't just need one person in your corner figuring out a solution. And we're not here, if we're working with you, to replace any of your current experts. You still have your accountant, your lawyer. And if you think about your business or you think about yourself, as a business, you're the CEO, you're the decision maker, but we're there to act as your CFO, to inform you, to let you know how your finances are, where the best options are, and then let you make the decision. And they are complicated. So we have a team of advanced financial planning specialists that work with us and our clients on these issues. We've worked with them numerous times on this wealth transition. There are very different ideas that are brought up. Some are, worthwhile to push forward. Some, might not make sense in your situation. And that's what's really difficult about this wealth transfer, is it's not the same for everyone. Your family situation is different from someone else's family situation, different family dynamics, different emotions. So we want to make sure that we protect and plan for everyone involved, the parents, the children, and then future generations. You've worked hard to build up your assets, to build up your wealth. We want to see it do what you want it to do, the goals that you want to achieve, your financial future, and then your children's as well.
Or the dogs, right?
Or the dogs, yeah. So we've been partnering on these complex issues with Canadians for over 90 years. And one of the tools that we use a lot is our advanced financial planning software, the IG Living Plan. It's interactive. And we find that we're able to put in some of these complex situations and see what it looks like today and into the future. So Barb, just on wrapping everything up, do you have any sort of closing thoughts or ideas that you want to speak about in regard to this topic?
It is something we're really passionate about, passionate about helping people make sure that what they want to do is what's actually going to happen, and talk through the tax, talk through family dynamics, talk through some different considerations. Because again, most of us have spent our lives creating our wealth. It didn't happen overnight. We didn't win the lottery. We built it up over time. So taking some time to make sure that what's going to happen next, whether that's next week, if we're gifting, next month, because we're making a charitable donation, we're giving whatever, giving to friends, whatever that might be, or way down the line. What we don't know is we don't know our expiry date. So we do need to just sort of plan, and then know that if we put a plan in motion that's appropriate to us now, we can always update it in the future if our circumstances change. Those conversations that we talk about being difficult conversations, they don't have to be. I think we build up in our minds so much about how challenging it's going to be to ask our parents, about what their plan is. Talk to our spouses. We're in a blended family. This is, we might upset somebody to talk about, how do we look after our kids from our first marriage? And we have to how do we talk about what if our spouse remarries after we're gone? They're not, they sound like heavy things, but in fact, when you start just peeling off the onion, especially in our experience, when we can be there to be part of that communication, part of that discussion, it takes a lot of the heat and the weight out of it. And then you can start saying, oh yeah, this is important to me. Oh no, that's not. Oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, I thought adding, myself onto my mom's, house title was the best decision for everybody. And then finding out, oh, yeah, maybe not, right? Because having the discussion before it happens. The other thing is you touched on the fact that we have this team of experts behind us. So we do have a team of experts behind us. Warren and I definitely don't know everything. Okay, we're generalists. I know, I'm sorry, my friend, we don't know everything. but we've got this great team behind us, and then we work with other accountants and lawyers outside of IG, like your accountants and lawyers, and try to pull it all together, sort of being that quarterback, let's help make sure that it all works together. So ultimately that family tree and your wishes, your family values, and your legacy continues as you wish.
So that wraps up our speaking segment. Allison, I think you were monitoring the question and answer chat. Do we have any questions that people would like us to answer?
Hey, Warren, thanks. Yeah, really good.
Oh, you had a bit of an echo and then we seem to have lost you.
Yeah, I was just trying to fix that. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Really good topic, really good questions coming in. Just a couple off the top. We may not be able to get to everything tonight, but the first one says here, instead of making a lump sum gift, I would rather give my child $10,000 a year. What do I need to consider when making this type of gift?
Well, you can structure it in many different ways. The one thing to consider is if your child is in a relationship, married, and you're giving $10,000 annually to your child, that now forms part of their family income. And so if that relationship were to break down, that would be considered part of spousal support. And so like the courts view that as continuing in perpetuity, as if it was income for that person, for your child. So they would have to, make it part of their spousal support.
Or I should say, they could.
They
It does depend a little time to time. The other thing that I think of is your child could grow to just be used to that and expect it every single year. So if you did it for 5 years and then suddenly decided, oh no, we want to give to the kids grandkids education savings plan or something like that. Again, communication, I think, is really important, so that the kid's not sitting there going, oh, I'm going to get $10,000 so we can take a family trip or, whatever. And then suddenly it's not there. So it can be a great strategy to start, giving some money if that's your intentions, and very generous. But there are some different considerations as part of that. I hope that answered your question, whoever asked.
One more here. It says, I'm worried that when my parents give me and my siblings the family cottage, that I will be stuck doing all the work. What should I do?
This is difficult. I think you need to have that open conversation that we've talked about several times tonight. Do you want the cottage? Talk with your sibling as well. Do they feel like they're going to be part of this, working together with you? It's tough because, sometimes the parents' ideals and vision for you and their kids is not necessarily what you have in mind or what your sibling has in mind. So having that open communication, having the conversation, being honest, it's tough to say. Sometimes sibling relationships are good, sometimes they're not, especially around a property where one person might be, everything needs to be in its place, and the other one is a little bit looser on that. So, it's finding a place, finding a happy medium. Sometimes when we talk with clients, they say, I want both of my children to enjoy the property. But then when you ask them, would you have done that with your sibling? They say, oh no, I can't stand my brother. I would never have shared my property with him. So it's having the conversation, talking it through, and seeing where everyone stands and how everyone truly feels about it.
I think being realistic about it too. I mean, I get teased before we go on every family vacation that I have this idealized vision of everybody getting along and not, no conflict, and everything's going to be perfect. And then I get discouraged because it doesn't work out perfectly, and people do get annoyed with each other or get impatient or whatever. Realistic is it's family, we're people, right? So, I think that dialogue around around mannerisms, around, how it would be used, and maybe some rules around it too. So if it is going to go down a generation, what are the rules? Is there some formal document that says this is how we're going to divvy up costs? This is how we're going to divvy up maintenance, all of those types of things. But it's kind of like, it's a bit like a family business where you which is one of my passions. I come from a family business. So I love business and I love family business, but there's a lot of challenges around trying to have a family business go down the generation and have siblings run it. So often you end up needing one person to be the leader, or one person take it over, or distinct roles for the siblings rather than them trying to be co-CEOs. And with a cottage, you're kind of asking them to be co-CEOs.
Great.
So you have another one?
Yeah,
Okay.
just one last one. It's a really good one. Instead of giving money to my kids, I would rather co-sign their mortgage. Is that a bad idea?
Yeah,
Do you want me to take this one?
Yeah. Well, we can both sort of fight through this one. This was a lot to this. So I would say you have to understand the responsibility that you're going to put on yourself and that you put on your child. If you're planning on co-signing so that way they can get a property, especially how you structure it can be really detrimental to you and your financial future. You're putting all of your eggs in your child's basket and making sure that they pay their mortgage every month or biweekly, whenever their payment is. And if that doesn't occur, you're putting yourself at risk. So being aware of that, if you're comfortable with that, it's a consideration, but there are a lot that goes into it. And I think
twists and turns of life, right?
Yeah.
Twists and turns. Like this, your kid could have a great job today, but what happens if they lose their job or become disabled and become sick, and can't make their mortgage payments? Then you're on the hook to do that. And are you really going to kick your kid out of their house? Especially when they're down on their luck or not well, or.
And sometimes we've seen parents say, okay, I'll put my property up too. And that's even worse now because you have two properties on one responsibility, right? So, thinking these things through, talking to experts, sometimes the simplest or most straightforward answer is not necessarily the best answer and often isn't. So there are creative ideas that we can come up with that can be used in order to structure it so that way everyone is protected. Also, the child needs to be protected too, and feeling like this is my property, I'm getting involved in it. The other side is taxes. It is a whole ball of wax with that, but you're co-signing, you're part of it too. Like, how are you splitting that up? How are you dividing everything? It's a lot.
And we believe in trying to help the child learn how to manage money well, because that'll set them up for life. And I'm a firm believer that part of them learning how to manage money well is learning to save, learning to live below their means, put some money aside. So if that means sometimes we have to delay that buying the house for a year so that they can establish some of those good habits, not necessarily a bad thing. It could be the best thing ever, because then they're learning to live. So sometimes parents jump to try to co-sign or whatever, go untitled, all those different things, because they feel that there's an urgency right now to do it, when maybe waiting a year and getting the kid in the right financial situation and with good habits and learning might actually be, again, that teaching them how to fish. Anything else?
No, I think that was the last question tonight. The other ones we'll get to after.
Okay.
But that was really good.
So thank you everyone for attending tonight. We do have a seminar next Thursday night, same time, same place. Show up again. This one's more on the estate side. So we're going to be talking about the nitty-gritty of estate structure, powers of attorney, wills, really getting more into that side of it rather than this aspect, which was gifting while living or giving with a warm hand.
And the other part next week is that we'll dive a little bit deeper into is some of that joint ownership, probate stuff, and what are some of the pros and cons of trying to avoid probate or adding joint ownership and things like that. Like we said earlier, it's an iceberg. We're just at the tip of it, but hope you all found some value from tonight's session. If anybody wants to reach out individually to ask some questions, none of the estate planning or any of this wealth transfer is cookie cutter. Every single situation and every single family is unique. We're very happy to give you a second opinion or help you sort of navigate through the process too. So feel free to reach out on a one-to-one basis as well. And hope you tune in next week.